Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Graying Jedi podcast and the last episode in which we'll be discussing Disney's The Acolyte Season 1. I'm Urza Master. Joining me as always, Jedi Master Psyllium Maas and Lord Uther. Gentlemen, welcome back to the Council Chambers. Welcome back to the world of the Acolyte. We've got quite the episode to unpack here, but before we get into the meat and potatoes of what we just saw, Jedi Master Psyllium Maas, let's hear the background on this season finale.
Thank you, Jedi Master Urza Master. Thank you, Jedi Master Lord Uther. And thanks to our Graying Jedi fans here at Prending Rebrand. We've had very good responses all season with the Acolyte. You've tuned in, even when sometimes we've had slightly irregular scheduling, episodes dropping in new and unusual times. You've found them, you've watched them, you've reacted, and for that we are eternally grateful. And I want to encourage you to keep following all of our exploits here in a galaxy far, far away, and over in the Alpha Quadrant, as we do our other big science fiction show, the Warp Core podcast, focusing on all things Star Trek. So there's room enough in this galaxy for fans of both science fiction sagas, whatever your preference. We hope you'll join us and cross over and sample each and see which one best suits you. This is indeed the climactic episode of Season 1, and I think all signs, at least from the show's creative forces, are pointing towards wanting to extend and continue this tale. There are plenty of threads that can still be pulled for future chapters. But we end tonight with The Acolyte, and the episode is called The Acolyte. It was directed by Hanel M. Culpepper, a name that should sound familiar to Graying Jedi fans. Culpepper was the first African-American and first woman to launch an all-new Star Trek series when she helmed the first 3 episodes of Star Trek Picard. And she also worked on episode 6 of The Acolyte, just 2 short chapters ago, Teach Corrupt. Our writer was a solo writer, Jason McAuliffe, and he worked on the 2nd episode of this first season, Revenge and Justice. So we have experienced Acolyte creatives behind the keyboard and the camera. And gentlemen, there's individual notes on this episode that we're probably going to touch on. And then there's the bigger picture, which is kind of, I'm going to take the 10,000 foot view, and then we can talk about moments and things that really affected us, jumped out at us, or just made us mad. I was thinking about this as the episode finished last night. This is the first Star Wars show without a net. And that is to say, if you look back at the feature films, the 3 trilogies, if you look at all of the Disney Plus Star Wars Lucasfilm content that has come before The Acolyte, generally speaking, there's always something, some connective tissue, some thread that links back to the larger story. Even let's start with The Mandalorian. If we're going to focus on the streaming shows, we had Jawas, we had Sandcrawlers, we had Ugnaughts, we had Stormtroopers, we had Bounty Hunters. As we move through the various seasons, we had appearances from characters, throughout the canon, including Ahsoka Tano, Luke Skywalker, R2-D2. We had locations that we were familiar with, like Tatooine. So even though The Mandalorian promised fresh storytelling and delivered, it also felt comfortable being able to use some of those ingredients that fans would recognize and were successful in earlier incarnations. The Book of Boba Fett the same way. We had Sarlaccs. We had Tusken Raiders. We had, Mos Eisleys, Mos Espas. And so again, there's the new and the familiar. Obi-Wan Kenobi had Obi-Wan Kenobi. and Anakin Skywalker, aka Darth Vader, and more stormtroopers, lots of stormtroopers. I think they even had Star Destroyers, or at least Imperial battle cruisers, and there were lightsabers and all sorts of things. Andor, even Andor, which stands apart as a truly adult-leaning, gripping political drama thriller. We had Cassian Andor, we had Mon Mothma, we had Coruscant. I mean, these were all things that sort of played in there. Ahsoka had the cast of Rebels brought to live action, and so on. But this show, The Acolyte, from the very beginning, these were not characters, this was not an era that we had spent a lot of time with. You may have, if you were reading the publishing part of Lucasfilm and Disney, where they were exploring this timeline set hundreds of years before The Phantom Menace. And there was one character from that publishing initiative that showed up in live flesh, Vernestra Rwoh, Jedi Master, whom we're going to talk about in this episode. But that was it, folks. And we spent a lot of time with new worlds and new faces and places and things that we had not necessarily been exposed to. There were Star Wars conventions like lightsabers and Sith, but these were people we had to warm up to, get to know, the twins, Osha and May, the Force Coven, Mother Anastasia, Kimir, aka the Stranger, as he's referred to apparently online. All of this we just sort of had to absorb, and that's kind of where I wanted to start my critique as a season, is what I see is a lot of seeds, space seeds. I see things that can grow and germinate and perhaps bear fruit. I see others that maybe will get pruned or trimmed or cast aside in favor of better performing perennials. But it's probably intimidating to come up with almost a blank whiteboard and try and fill that in to successfully appeal to Star Wars fans, young and old, across the generations. And I think that's kind of where my support for this series and my optimism for it and how it's gone and where it can go, it lies. In that they really did have, they didn't get to fall back on easy connections or, for a word I can't stand, fan service, if you will. They really had to chart their own path in many ways. And it's an interesting path. And like I say, we've talked about how, the Jedi are now viewed as more human, perhaps, less mythic. Or perhaps the Sith, while still being evil, there might be something to their argument of being an oppressed minority, stamped out. And honestly, guys, we had another fantastic lightsaber sequence between Jedi Master Saul and Kimir. I mean, the choreography on this series, if you want to take zero from anything else, whoever was the stunt master coordinator on this show really earned their chops, all their galactic credits, Republic credits, because it was just phenomenal. I mean, the moves were fluid, it was graceful, it was energetic. It didn't feel like it was created in the editing suite. And I know Manny Jacinto, who plays Kimir, did, a preponderance of his own stunt work and his own things. And you could see that. There was a grace to it and a ferocity to it. And Lee Jung-jae as Master Saul and Daphne Keane as Jecki, like just up and down the board, the people responsible, the stunt coordinators and the swordsmen and all of that, they really, really did a great job. And we had another highlight moment, throughout this episode. And we had some surprise cameos, which we'll talk about shortly. And we had, again, explorations of the Jedi trying to cover their own proverbial cabooses. And what that means as far as Vernestra Rwoh, going forward, because this is a character that I have a particular point of view on, because I've read about her in the books and the comic books, and now here she is several decades past where I'm familiar with her, and she's making choices and decisions that on the surface may almost make her seem like she's part of the problem, not the solution. But I know her to be, as a character, I know her to be a valid, valiant, brave, trustworthy, honest Jedi. So there's a lot to unpack on the choices that she's forced to make. And that's building up to my big point, which is my favorite character in this entire season finale was actually the Senator Rayencourt. He was played by actor David Harewood. And he was, you've seen him before in shows like Homeland and so forth. He's a working character actor. As soon as you see his face, you say, I know him from somewhere, and then you rush to IMDb to check his credits. But his brief scenes with Vernestra in between the action bits, it pretty much told what the story the Acolyte was interested in terms of what the point of view they were trying to get across. And he accuses Vernestra and the Jedi of lacking transparency and basically just, being able sort of there's no checks and balances. And he says that they have unchecked power posing as a religion. And he says when you're looking up to heroes, you don't have to face what's right in front of you. And if a Jedi does go rogue, for example, and starts creating havoc, then who is strong enough in the galaxy to stand up to that? And that's a new point of view, and one that I find can coexist with George Lucas's original vision of the light and the dark and Sith and Jedi and so forth. I don't think this paints the Jedi with such a broad brush that, all of them are corrupt or foolish or evil or just, that's not what the show is saying. Nor do I think that it excuses the dastardly behavior of Sith Lords and Acolytes and apprentices who thirst for their own knowledge there. But I think it brings a nice balance to storytelling, and it's where storytelling, quite frankly, is now. When you look across the breadth and depth of fantasy and science fiction and dramatic storytelling and so forth, people can accept nuance. They can walk and chew gum at the same time. The Jedi can both be a noble cause and something to aspire to, that we all hope we could be as moral and stick to our personal codes. But we might come up short, as Saul did, in terms of how he handled the initial tragedy on Brendock and how it came full circle 16 years later. I think there's room in the galaxy for those points of view. I know Andor showed us that with Cassian going from a criminal and a scoundrel and somebody you wouldn't lend any credits to somebody who subscribes to a more noble cause and joins the rebellion. So that's where I am, gentlemen. I've seen trepidation from, people saying, well, that's not Star Wars. I think it is. And I'm excited to see where it goes next. And I'm excited because I think Osha's ultimate transformation into the title character, the Acolyte, I think we saw from the very first shot of her and Kemir, she can combine sort of the worst of both worlds. She has the Force Coven's ability to use dark magic, previously untapped, as well as all of those emotions that anger, desire, hate, fear, that would make her a very powerful Sith. And I think Urza Master, Jedi Master Urza Master, I think he was spot on in his most recent projections where the story is going. This is the Anakin high M count. This is the beta launch of this project, and I think the visual confirmation of a certain Sith Lord only confirms where we think this story may be headed. Something goes wrong, obviously. Kemir is not Chief Palpatine. That's not Darth Plagueis's actual Padawan who betrays him, or apprentice who betrays him, and then later rises to his own dark realm. So something, we haven't seen yet how it balances out, but something goes awry, and then when we put the pieces back together and bake a better recipe, that's where we get Anakin, the chosen one, and the events of the prequel trilogy. So I think Jedi Master, Urza Master, and Lord Uther, I think they both alluded to that, and you can find that predictions. Because they did it, they said it. They didn't rely on Forbes or GameStop or any of those websites that have been sounding off on this Star Wars series. They came to it from their own clever consciousness and study of the Jedi texts. So don't believe Yoda. These things are important and need to be read for a reason. And speaking of Yoda, last but not least, even though we didn't get Frank Oz's croaky vocalizations, there was your first real thread back to all things Star Wars with the glimpse of the wrinkly green ears and so forth. And he and Vernestra have a relationship in the books and the comic books. So that was altogether not unexpected, but a delight to see. So, gentlemen, I know you've got plenty to chew on here. I know you may not share my passion and enthusiasm, and that's fine because we welcome all points of view here in the council. But you can go either direction. Talk about the individual episode, talk about your feelings on the show, and your hope. Is it a new hope if they decide to continue this?
Well, I think it goes without saying that we were basically right that this is the story of Darth Plagueis and building up towards Anakin. And this is definitely a justification of some of the choices they made in the prequel trilogy. I think the idea of a chink in the armor for the Jedi was one we came up with. It's like, okay, they're trying to show off that the Jedi are flawed, which, yeah, it's a nuance, and certainly it tracks with the prequel trilogy. I think that's why people didn't like it the first time around. But I think now that we've got a lot of the dots connected, we can see, especially in like episode 5, episode 6, there was some gray, some variance on the Jedi way that even Luke Skywalker didn't quite follow the path of Obi-Wan. He didn't quite finish the training with Yoda. There was a little bit of nuance there. Now, it was still very much a white hat, black hat, good guy, bad guy, which is fine. It's entertaining, and it was definitely of the era. And it was a narrower scope. I mean, just everything about those movies was narrower. You could do a lot more with CGI, with technology, in the prequel trilogy, sequel trilogy, and certainly now in these streaming shows. There's a lot more freedom to show the bounds of these stories. And I think it's interesting to see that the Jedi, even though they are, I think, a religion, they are also very much a political entity. They have to be,
Yes.
right? Because they're force users in every system, on every planet with people. Every race, is represented. And there's obvious corollaries with that with real religions on Earth, Catholicism, Islam, to a lesser extent Judaism, I guess, these days. But the cool thing about the Jedi way is that by and large it's good. And you could say the same of any religion. Like, by and large, religion on its own isn't a bad thing. It's provides comfort and strength and team and unity and connectedness. Just like the Force, just like the Jedi. I think that '70s show put it best when they made it into the religion that it was supposed to be for Topher Grace's character. I forget his name, Eric. And of course, in that '90s show, you get Eric's daughter, Leia, and he teaches, Star Wars religion at a university. And that's, you could develop that into something that through hundreds of years may become a religion. It has all the tenets. It's based in mythos. And with that, like real religions, there are flaws. There are people who are flawed. Even the most well-meaning people are human, and or have dark impulses. That's just nature, human nature or otherwise. And it's interesting to see those stories play out. With the Acolyte specifically, though, you kind of get these sort of minor adjacent religions portrayed as well. The Force Witches, the Sith, and perhaps others that may be revealed in time or in other shows. Because if the Force is truly something that binds, or the thread, or whatever the person or people want to call it, it's everywhere. And it's going to have multiple iterations. It's going to have multiple types of users to varying strengths. But I do think it's a little odd that the whole point of this Osha May experiment, which I think it's a Plagius experiment, is to develop the Force choke. That to me felt very odd. But if you think about it, I sat and I thought about this for a while. I don't think anybody else other than Vader uses the Force choke. Nobody does. Yet there's all these Sith. Darth Maul doesn't use it. Kemir throws his lightsaber, but very few people do that.
Grogu.
So that's...
Oh no, Grogu. Yeah, years later. You're right.
Yeah, I mean...
But
and then you think about like Force Lightning. Very few Force users use Force Lightning. So is this just Plagius exploring the dark side to build up a repertoire of like abilities that he's going to instill in the Sith that will bring down the Jedi? We still don't really know the actual motivations of the Sith. Kemir says he wants to freely practice his religion, but I think about Dooku, who, just wants to expose, the Senate for its corruption and, prove to everybody that, there's actually dark forces at work here and they may actually be the Jedi. Obviously some of that is selling a line, but what are these real motivations of Plagius? Is it that he, being the wise, just wants to learn the most about the Force and be free to learn all of its nuances? Although he's a pretty wicked-looking creature, for the brief look we got, it's like, whoa. But so is Palpatine, if you think about it. I mean, he hides behind Ian McDermott's face, but later on becomes this sort of grayish ghoul in a robe, and then of course a giant clone of himself. And I also find it interesting, the power of one, the power of two, the power of many. The Force Witches being the many. I mean, are they tapping into the idea of all of the Sith power can be combined here on the one side, and then also in the beyond, kind of thing, like we see with the Jedi and Ahsoka? There's a lot of things they can explore in a second season, and I think I was a little disappointed that there weren't more loose ends tied up, because it felt very easy to just say, see you next season, this is it. And that, I'll admit, it was a little frustrating because there are some open questions that are just not addressed. I also get bothered by Vernestra. At one point she's having a call and the voice on the line sounds rather sinister. So it makes me wonder, like, is she potentially one of the Sith on the down low? Like a Dooku, or somebody who's like tertiary Sith, and or kind of a little on the weird side, or is she playing the political game for the sake of the Jedi, like maybe a Mace Windu, or some of those characters in the Council from the prequel trilogy. Likewise, I wonder, we know the scars on Kemir's back. They're clearly from a whip. They're clearly from her whip. Why? Where did that relationship go wrong? We don't get that confrontation here. And when did Sith get the ability to wipe minds? What was that about? Like, maybe that's a Kemir specific ability. Maybe that's why he was cast out as a Padawan. I don't know. I mean, I find it intriguing. I did like what they were doing with this episode, but knowing now that this whole 8 episode season really didn't have much of a payoff. I'm a little disappointed. There was, of course, the lightsaber battle. It was great. I think Soul's story was one of tragedy, but it was also kind of nuanced. He grew to love this girl that he felt guilty over, essentially just reacting. He reacted instinctively to what he perceived as a threat, thinking he was doing the right thing. He made the choice to kill Mother Anastasia, and yeah, it was probably the wrong choice, and he had to suffer with that. But from what we know about Osha, you'd think maybe she would listen a little more than she did. Especially after May told her. She didn't believe her, obviously, but it's like, yes, it's true. Clearly he's emotional about it. He clearly regrets it. All of the relationship that Osha and he built up this whole season, you're telling me that she wouldn't give him the benefit of at least being able to explain himself fully? Like, I reacted, she was potentially going on the attack, and Jedi Knights are trained to defend. He thought he was defending himself, and he realized he'd made a grave mistake, and everything he did after that was simply to try and right the wrong, which is noble. It's honorable. He was ready to throw himself at the foot of the council. He could have explained that, and it kind of made me a little bit iffy on why did Osha jump so quickly to the dark side. And that, I think, is actually an open-ended question here, too, because maybe there's more at play that we're not realizing. And that, I think, is important. I also think that the Jedi Master Psyllium Maas has a great point that obviously whatever happens with Osha, it goes wrong somehow. Because Kimir is not Palpatine, Osha is not Anakin, and we know Plagueis had many failed experiments. So I'm going to forecast here, and I'd love to get your guys' thoughts on this, but my forecast is, of course, that possibly Season 2, maybe Season 3, depends on how long they play this out for, but I think we get essentially an Osha who turns heavily to the dark side, but really has no interest in conquest, has no interest in power, no vested interest, because her primary focus that pushes her to the dark, that changes her lightsaber red, which that was really cool to see, it's over. She got her vengeance. She killed. She killed the person she thought she needed to kill. It really wasn't necessary to do anything else. There's not really a driving dark side force there. She's agreed to train, but to what end? To what purpose? She has no further beef with the Jedi at this point. She's given up her sister. What motivates her now? And that I think is what's going to be her ultimate undoing. Is with Anakin, you have this very deep fear of loss and knowing that loss is going to happen. And the only thing that really derails Anakin from becoming what he probably should have been, was like the ultimate Sith, is the fact that Obi-Wan's the chosen one and beats him. And then doesn't kill him, of course, which leaves him weak and leaves the avenue for the Force to be rebalanced in time. So I think you get kind of the opposite here. You get somebody who has all the potential of being the one that they wanted Anakin to be, but doesn't want it. Has no motivations. Maybe he's super powerful, but really, as far as dark side goes, really isn't all that committed. And that's her Achilles heel. She's really not in it for anything. There's no motivation. So I think I could see, Darth Plagueis realizing this and maybe instructing Kimir to kill her because she's a failed experiment. She doesn't have the drive that he needs for conquest. Kimir either refuses and then is killed, or maybe he goes for it and then he is killed by Osha, and then Osha realizes that, this Darth Plagueis was behind it, and then tries to kill him, and then the new apprentice, Palpatine, comes in and kills her. And then Palpatine learns everything Plagueis knows, and then kills him, because he has the thirst for conquest, but not the power, necessarily.
Power.
There you go. So that's my thought.
Interesting.
That's how I could see this all connecting.
Interesting.
Yeah, Lord Uther.
Yeah, poor writing. I hate to say it. You know, yes, Andor didn't. There are things that we hadn't seen before with Andor, but the writing was excellent, and that makes up for it, right? Here, and this is going to go back to our last episode, which everyone can see by clicking the subscribe button and going back and looking at our marvelous library of videos that are out there, whether it's the Graying Jedi podcast or the Warp Core. There's a wealth of stuff that you can hear us talking about, and you should. But anyway, wait, where was I going? Oh no, I lost it with that whole diatribe right there. Anyway, I just said poor writing and/or things we haven't seen before. Oh, I think you could have gotten rid of this whole season and just I said this before too. The Osha and May thing, I don't think it was really needed. If your goal is to get to Plagueis, then why didn't you just go there? In a sense, that's kind of my first thing. It reminds me of to me, that's my issue with the Phantom Menace. Get rid of the first movie. Episode 2 should have been Episode 1. Episode 3 should have been Episode 2. And then Episode 3 should have been him hunting the Jedi down and killing them, because that's part of his lore as Vader, is going out there and actually hunting down the leftover Jedi, which there were a whole lot of leftover Jedi, but that's a whole other story. Oh, I got it. I feel like this whole thing is justifying, like you brought up last episode, there we go, the idea of there are gray Jedi. To me, that should be taking place with Rey now moving forward, right? The idea that there's gray Jedi before that, because I do think that's what this is leaning towards a little bit. I didn't think that was really a thing, or it was never really brought up before. And this is where I feel like canon or lore is being messed with a little bit to try and justify the last 3 movies. And look, everyone knows I'm not a big fan, especially of 7 and 8, or 8 and 9, whichever the last 2 were. I'm not, because I feel like you stole Luke Skywalker from me. But again, we'll get to that when we get to the movies. Stop justifying those movies and move forward. Like I said before, so let's talk about, just real quick, like Yoda, because I was even writing that down. You're telling me that Yoda can't see through Venestra's, because Venestra's must be going back to him and saying, here's what really happened, and here's what I said. Or maybe she's trying to use the false story and she's going to tell him that, and he can't see through that. Because I thought the whole idea of the Jedi being blind to the dark side, that's what episode 2 and 3 are about, maybe even 1 a little bit, right? The Jedi can't see what's happening and the Sith have risen up. But isn't this like 100 years in the past or 100 years before that? So, I mean, you're telling me this is taking root at this point, but you haven't explained that to me properly, in my opinion, in this series. I haven't seen it. To me, the only thing that saved this episode was the lightsaber duel. I just think the rest of it, I mean, there are links. There are things in this series that we have seen before. The M count. The idea of there just being life created out of nowhere and this lady giving birth. And like I had said before, I was hoping to see... I wanted to see something different. And I know I keep saying this, but I feel like I'm seeing the same thing again. Right? Like, hold on. Saul can't break a Padawan's chokehold on him. I thought he's a Jedi Master. And now she's suddenly out of nowhere. Now, if you want to somehow explain to me that's her hatred, you really haven't set that up right, or the dialogue hasn't set that up right. I feel like, to your point, Urza Master, to me it was, she was jumping back and forth between emotions, quicker than I gain and lose weight. I mean, it's just happening so fast. And now, all of a sudden, which it was a cool effect with the lightsaber, I will give you that. If you wanted to have the whole series trending slowly towards her going to the dark side like that, and then you want to pull that move, which to me would have been which they did, right? Like the lightsaber turns red, and then she's got the chokehold because that's her hatred and she wants to kill him. That makes sense to me. But the flipping back and forth, again, because is she a gray Jedi? Like, is that what they're getting at? But that's not really explained. I don't see that. Like, I have a serious issue with that. And then again, you're painting the Jedi to be bad people. So Venestra is doing exactly what the Senator doesn't want her to do, and she's lying to everybody. So this Jedi feels she has the lie. She pins it all on Saul, saying he's the one that did this. Why? Because she's afraid the Jedi are going to get investigated? Why wouldn't you just go forward and say what happened? You're again, I feel like you're using plot lines or plot devices from other movies, and you're bringing it into this. And I know, I guess I'm ranting on this a little bit. I don't need to see that. And so that's where I struggle. Like, I was hoping this episode, seeing Plagueis and seeing that lightsaber duel, fantastic. But like, even the way she escapes when Saul puts her on that table and Pip starts doing his work to unbind her, like, even that, I'm like, wait, he can't hear that, or he doesn't sense that, or what's going on? I feel in his death, I so wanted to be torn up by his death because I really liked him as a character. It felt very blah. Like, that's how he dies to someone who doesn't even, like, where did her, now she knows a chokehold and he can't break that. I thought he's this great Jedi Master. So obviously I had a lot of issues. I don't know what they're going to do in season 2. I don't know why you had to use Osha and May as a vehicle to get there, because like I've said before, it's just rehashing that story. Sorry. I struggle. I struggle with it a lot. Yeah.
Well, I think
that's where I'm at.
I bring it up again. Baylan Skoll's whole point is he's trying to undo the cycle of things, and that I really don't want to go full MCU on this, but it feels kind of Marvel Universe-y. Like, they're trying to build towards these Rey movies with all of these characters. I think Mandalorian, Grogu, everybody. Ahsoka, I think, might be dead at that point. I'm not sure. We hear her voice at the end of.
But I even love that though with Ahsoka. To your point, we don't know what's going to happen. Like, we're on the. At least I am. I can't wait to see what they're going to do with it, because to me it does. And I'm yes, I'm going to back up what you're saying again, because the Baylan Skoll thing, that is a fresh take, that he wants to break this whole thing, and that makes me excited. And I didn't want to see that again here. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. But I think that's so key though, that what you're saying, like, that's what we want. We want that fresh take, which I thought I was going to get something I haven't seen before, but I didn't. Sorry, go ahead.
And that's, I think, bear in mind this is like a prequel, right, to that. So all of this is just setting up the fact that all of these Sith and Jedi stories have really happened before. The Skywalker saga is not unique. It's another one of essentially these Jedi versus Sith experiments that happens to go to like a grandiose scale, as opposed to a couple of twins that wreak a little bit of havoc, and 7 out of the 5,000 Jedi have to deal with it, right? I think the bigger story here is really the Andor type story of the High Republic. And what I find intriguing, and I think what redeems this show a little bit for me, is that it's so small, but it's really impactful, because you're sowing these seeds of distrust in the Jedi this early on, at the height of their power, essentially. It always made it feel really weird to me that in episode 3, most of the Senate's just like on board with, yeah, F the Jedi, man. What? Like, they're the Jedi. Like, why are all of these senators like on board? Like, did Palpatine influence all of them? Are they all so weak-minded? Or was this something that built over time? And that, I think, is really one of the myriad of reasons this show is what it is because that's just showing that, like, at the height of their power, there was maybe a handful of senators who were like, I don't like these guys. I don't know why. And that just mounts and mounts and mounts, probably due to some Sith interference, but also due to the fact that, what's his name was totally on point with is like, okay, we'll accept that you guys have power, but you need to be transparent about it, because if you have all this power and you're unchecked, what happens if a Vader rises up? Who's going to or Palpatine? Who's going to stop him? And there it
Right.
is.
So this Jedi plays right into it and does it anyway. Like that's what I'm not understanding here, because again, I'm sorry, but I still feel like that's a phantom. Like that's the first three movies, not that they were lying, but that they were blind to it. So, but here now, we have someone who's supposed to be allegedly a noble Jedi lying. Now, could she be working for Plagueis on the side somehow? Let's just pretend she is. But Yoda can't see that. And that's where, I'm sorry, man, but like that's where I struggle with it, and here's why. Seeing episodes 4, 5, and 6, to me that is the lore, that sets the framework for all of this, right? And I agree with you. Different times, so the story is written very, good guy, bad guy, if that's where we want to go. With the redemption arc, I can live with all that because that's the first time I see it. But the idea that the Jedi are true and noble, and that's what kind of sets them apart from a scheming Sith in a sense, who, again, they want all this power and they're going to rule the galaxy and all these other things, whatever, their end game is in a sense. MCU end game, hello. Anyway. But now I'm seeing it 100 years before. I just don't. Here's what I like about the Knights of the Old Republic games. They go they go way back and give you a whole fresh take on everything, like everything that's happening during that time period. I think it's 1,000 or 10,000 years before, like the New Republic comes about. Like that's a fresh take, and we know where it's going. And that's my issue here in a sense. We know where this is going. We know where Andor is going, and that is a beautiful thing. We can extrapolate where Ahsoka is going to go because we know the books and we kind of know Thrawn, so we can kind of take a guesstimate to where that's going to go. I know where this is going, and it just doesn't line up. So that's why when I know I let off, maybe it's kind of harsh, where I went poor writing, but I just didn't feel compelled at any point. Like Saul's death felt very empty to me. Very empty. I would have rather he died by Khmer's lightsaber than a chokehold, because I still think he should have been able to break it, because he was a Jedi Master, and this is someone who barely dabbled in in a sense, dabbled in the Force, just a little dabble, and now all of a sudden she can do these things. Anyway, but I digress and I ramble.
I'm gonna just finish those thoughts. This show is no different than any of the Jedi we met in 4, 5, and 6, or 1, 2, and 3. The Jedi have a tendency to, let's just say, stretch the truth when it suits them. Obi-Wan Kenobi begins his relationship with young Luke Skywalker by telling him the facts from a certain point of view. Anakin lies.
Which is what Saul did.
Right. Anakin lies.
Which is what Saul did to protect her feelings.
Right.
Obi-Wan's doing that to protect Luke because he doesn't want Luke going down the path that his father did.
That's right.
So I think that's
everybody that he comes into contact with his secret marriage, his
right, and he becomes a Sith.
Eternity, exactly. So, if anything, the Jedi have never been portrayed as always the truth-telling Dale Coopers of the Star Wars universe. So there is a little bit of a thing you can postulate there.
Do you think Saul's lie and Venestra's lies are two different things? Because I think they are completely two different things.
Well,
like
okay,
one is conniving and one is protecting.
I can answer I don't believe it's conniving. I think the political reality, and by this I'll take the senator character from Ahsoka and the senator character we were introduced to in this episode. When the senator character in Ahsoka confronts Mon Mothma and Hera and everything and says, there's no such thing as Grand Admiral Thrawn, he's been gone for a decade, blah, blah, blah. We, the viewers, know this guy is full of hot air and he's completely wrong. He's the Paul Gleason character in Die Hard, the inept police commander who makes every poor decision and every wrong-headed move so that our hero, Bruce Willis, can save the day from Hans Gruber and the terrorists. So in that context, the character of the senator in Ahsoka very much functions as everything that comes out of my pie hole is incorrect because the heroes are the good guys and they know what's up. Hera and Ahsoka and Mon Mothma and C-3PO are all who we should be rooting for. This show, even though the Senator Rayencourt is clearly on the opposition to the Jedi, you have to stop and listen to what he's saying, which is why I highlighted it, because what he's saying does have the kernel of truth, and that these Jedi do, in their hubris, believe themselves to be the galaxy's peacekeepers. I mean, it's a wonder they didn't run somebody for chancellor, right? You can just imagine if a Jedi decided to hold the reins of political power firmly in their grasp, as Palpatine rises to do, and then you see what he does with it. So,
But isn't
I think Ursa's point is very much, this is Vernestra. I'm familiar with her in her youth, and like I say,
right?
her character primarily appears in stories written for middle schoolers, 7th and 8th grade audiences. So she is the heroine, right? She is the force of good. She's a little self-serious at times. She doesn't like it when people call her Vern. She does not like the shortening of her name. She has her lightsaber whip. She makes decisions, that a 17-year-old or 16-year-old would make. But generally speaking, you're rooting for her. So imagine my conflict to see her not exactly as I initially envisioned. And that's not an accident. Leslie Headland and the show's creators and all of that, they didn't just say, oh, you know what we'll do? We'll take somebody that the hardcore High Republic fans are familiar with, and we'll just make her bad. I don't think that's what happened here. I think there's a very careful reasoning for it. We may disagree with her reasoning, but I believe Vernestra's motives, at least as presented here, is if I come clean with Yoda, and there's no telling that she's going to come clean with Yoda. If I come clean and tell everybody what really happened, the Jedi may be finished in the galaxy, much to Urza Master's point. Like, they'll be hunted down and done to extinction before we even have a galactic empire. So she's thinking only through the lens, the prism of how do I protect my religion, my order, the very foundation that I've grown in. How do I protect those values? I know they're good values. But if I come out and say that there are rogue Jedi, or even worse, dark side users who are creating mayhem and leaving bodies in their wake, like, you can imagine what a senator getting in front of a video recorder would say and drive up the fear, the paranoia, and so forth. I mean, again, the parallels are you don't have to go very far to see how that happens. So does she make a choice? Yes, she does. Does she do so because she's trying to preserve her way of life and the ways of life of everyone who follows the Jedi Code, who are the galaxy's peacekeepers? Absolutely. And it's a testament to how she thinks that if you just came clean, that it would probably obliterate all the goodwill and everything that has been built up by the Jedi. So I think we might look at it. I don't think she's in league with Plagueis. I don't think she's a hidden Sith. I think she's just saying, look, these are terrible headlines. We cannot afford to have this come out and have further investigations, because what if they find another Jedi who's embezzling from the galactic treasury, or they find someone who's, actually running a slave camp out on one of the distant worlds where there's not as much. Like, as soon as you start turning over rocks, you're going to find things crawling out from underneath. So I think Vernestra makes a choice. Now, to your final point about Jedi Master's powers. Obviously, when you're Superman and you're invulnerable, the only thing that can stop you is kryptonite. So the idea that Saul could break a force choke, have you ever seen anyone break a force choke? No. And I think the reason that they did that simply was the answer to the riddle. How do you kill a Jedi without using a weapon? And here was the novel way to do it. You can say, I get it. I saw what they did there. It's the setup to a punchline. You know, how do you kill a Jedi without a weapon? Well, you use a weapon that has heretofore not been shown, or at least emphasized in the show. And then we'll go on later, and we'll see it constantly. As far as Yoda being blinded, he was blinded by the rise of Palpatine. They never sniffed it out in episodes 1, 2, or 3. Yeah, there were inklings, there were suggestions that a dark shadow was out there somewhere, but he never was able to put 2 and 2 together, and he's the wisest, most benign, most powerful Jedi of them all. So the ability to sway and cloud minds and deceive, it's not as far-fetched as you would have other members believe. In fact, if you don't want to believe it, it's very easy not to. So if Yoda does not
So
want...
if you're not, so you're destroying the Phantom Menace, because if he doesn't know it here and he winds up getting wind of it, then he should have known what was happening in the Phantom Menace.
No, what I'm saying is,
he's the
if
Jedi
Yoda
Master of the
doesn't
High
want to
Council.
believe Vernestra is deceiving him, because again, they have a good relationship in the High Republic things that have already come about. If he doesn't want to believe that she's being less than truthful, that's what blinds you. Like, I don't want to believe that my fellow members of the Jedi Council would ever do anything wrong ever. But I know that can't possibly be true. So that's what I'm saying, is that there's a subconscious or even conscious rejection of the idea that somehow, that's why you can, if you are truly a sociopath, you can manipulate people, because there's no way Aaron could have possibly said or done that. I don't believe it. So, and I'm thinking that's what we have here. Again, lots of fertile ground to harvest and sow and plow, but I believe that's what it is here. Because I wrestled with Vernestra, like, that's not Vernestra, what's going on? I'm like, wait a minute. She's not doing this out of some sinister purpose. She truly believes in the Jedi Order. She just mistakenly believes that the truth will be worse than the lie. And everyone knows it's not just the crime, it is the cover-up.
I also think, and you're saying it right, like, you know her from the books. I don't know her from that, right? So this is my first exposure to her in a sense.
Sure.
I didn't know Ahsoka either, but I knew who she was, and I knew what she was through, in my opinion, great writing that got her to that point. And I think that's why I'm struggling here. So we'll agree to disagree in a sense, because I'm not seeing it, and maybe if I had read the books, I would have more of an understanding of that. And here's one more quick question. At this point, how long have the Jedi kind of been in power? Had it been 1,000 years, 10,000 years?
Yeah, we don't...
Like, how long has the High Republic... I'm sorry, wrong question. How long has the High Republic been around?
I mean, I can go and grab my timelines book, but they were
It was like 1,000 years or
yeah,
something like that?
several hundred years.
Probably working alongside the Jedi, so it could be like that. At least that's the way I'm perceiving it here. They're almost an arm of the government, maybe, an arm of the High Republic in a sense, that can be wielded as needed. Peacekeepers of the Galaxy, that's what they're kind of
Explorers
talked about in 4, 5, and 6. And I guess that's why I'm struggling with all this. I just don't feel like it's a part of the lore. So I'll leave it at that. Otherwise, we're going to spin our wheels for another hour. Which I'm sure everyone would like to hear anyway, but hey, we can get to it.
Well, gentlemen, we've seen a Kyber crystal change colors live time. How about our Kyber crystals for this episode and this series? Is this the series you're looking for? Are your Kyber crystals giving off an aura of red, blue, green, yellow, perhaps white, maybe purple? Jedi Master Psyllium Maas, you've been green all along. Did we round out this season green?
Yes, we did. Jedi Master Urza Master, Jedi Master Psyllium Maas, and Jedi Master Lord Uther. Again, the Star Wars saga is someplace that my creativity and my imagination loves to frolic. And what I like even more than what is in front of me is what's in front of me. The possibility of more connections, more explorations, more indications of where this all can go. And yes, do I believe that a show like Andor from Tony Gilroy is just a standalone superior piece of television entertainment, even without the Star Wars label? You bet. I think this is a good Star Wars show. Like, this is what I want to be under the Star Wars banner. I think it has room to grow and become even more powerful than you could possibly imagine. But I'll take a wait and see approach and see how they do it. I'm glad that they tried something different, completely different, in my opinion. I know Lord Uther and I would disagree on that. Like I say, I feel like this was really a lightsaber stab in the dark, and I think for the most part I got what I wanted. I got shirtless Sith, I got lightsaber choreography like you wouldn't believe, I got new worlds, I got Jedi, Wookiees, I got enough to give me that taste, to hold me over until the next Filoni Favreau incarnation of this universe comes out later this year with Skeleton Crew. And that will be underneath their umbrella. This show, like Andor, was developed sort of outside of that. So I'm anxious to see what they pull off in the next installment later this year. So I'm all for it. We're greens up, down, and all around.
Oh, you want me to go? What's a step above red? Because that's when purple,
Orange.
blue. Oh, you're telling me orange. Here. Then I'm gonna give it an orange.
An orange spray
a
bottle.
cleaning spray. A cleaning spray bottle orange, because I want to clean up this entire series, and just, in my opinion, get some writing that
Give it a spritz.
pushes it. I feel like they can do better. Everyone heard my rant for the past 30 minutes, and I'll just leave it at that. If they do a season 2, I just hope they tighten things up a little bit, in my opinion.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I'm going to round out this episode with blue. I'm going to give the series a blue. I find it to be a vehicle. It's a justification of the movies, prequels and sequels, and ties in loosely to the original canon. I liked it. It was entertaining. There was at no point during the show that I felt disappointed, at least to the extent that I felt it wasn't worth watching anymore, or I had to walk away. I felt engaged. I would watch it again. I think it needs a little more intrigue. I agree. I did not feel for Jedi Master Soul at the end. I don't think they built up the deep conflict of his choice well enough. I don't think that's on the actor. I think he sold it well. I think they just didn't spend enough time here. And I think the flip-flop of May and Osha was predictable. I would have liked to see those two have a bigger confrontation. I don't think we got enough of a fight, frankly. I also don't think we had enough of a build-up to Osha going full-on hatred of Soul. I don't think it made sense. Even though, like Anakin, she feared to lose her mother, she grew in hatred because she lost her mother because of somebody she loved, or that loved her, killed her and never told her, but had a very good explanation that maybe it's her age, but again, she's not like a teenager. She's supposed to be an adult here. This is 16 years. She was, 9 or 10 at the time, so she's in her mid-20s. She's not going to react like a kid who just says, shut up, shut up, shut up, and has a complete meltdown. Even in a very heightened emotional state, this is a person she grew up knowing and trusting. I didn't buy it, that she wouldn't give him the chance to explain himself. Now, I do think that you could, in a season 2, explain why that is, because clearly she was shaken up afterwards, and that's good. That could be very good storytelling, but to end it right here feels incomplete. So I'm going to go with vehicle. It's a vehicle. They're trying to build up this cyclical storyline that I hope they come back to in either the Rey movies or Mandalorian and Grogu or something, and they break the cycle, because that would be compelling. I also still think there are concurrent stories you could tell that are far removed from all of this and would be just as entertaining.
It's just, so I got to add in one more point, because it's just another excellent point, which you both make excellent points all the time. But again, you're talking about going backwards in a second season to make the first season justifiable in a sense, which is what I know. And again, I know our thought process lines up a little bit different than Psyllium Maas, and that's okay. But it continuously seems like that's what they're trying to do for the sequel movies, is go backwards and try and make it better all the time. And that's what I love about Ahsoka. That's what I love about Andor. It doesn't seem to be doing that. And I'll stop.
Although I will say, and we'll talk about the movies because we're still going to watch them. We're still going to talk about them on this show. And you can see our episode 1 review by going back. I will say I actually genuinely enjoy 1, 2, and 3 way more than I ever did before because of these shows. I'm going to go out on a limb and say I kind of hope they keep adding to the lore to make those movies a little better. Because some of what they've added, not all of it, but some of it feels really cool. Like, I'm picking up on things that sort of justifies stuff they did in that movie that I didn't get. And now that I have a way to connect it to the greater whole, it actually is more entertaining. It's kind of like if they ever made a Lethal Weapon 5 and tried to justify Lethal Weapon 3, I would be in for that. Like, you can do that. Murtaugh and Riggs, like, first of all, I will watch Lethal Weapon 1000 if they made that many.
Yes, it's hilarious.
But it's no different than what we see in Picard either. They used a little bit of that show to kind of justify some of the loose ends or some of the weird, goofy stuff. However, I will say I think better writing, better execution.
That's all I was going to say. You said it for me. Thank you.
So, my biggest point here is I think, and this I think goes to the editors and potentially the showrunners of the series, I think you needed longer episodes. I think another 10 minutes per episode, 15 minutes maybe in a couple. You needed more meat on the bones, and I think you're expecting your audience to develop an emotional connection to these characters that you didn't take the time to foster. And I'm not going to blame that on anybody's perspective, because I think everybody approaches how they feel about storytelling differently. Look at our panel. Jedi Master Psyllium Maas has a steeped lore perspective. Lord Uther, he's got this cleaner, huffing perspective. Just kidding.
It's the Italian. That's
Yeah, right. And I've got the desperately trying not to go bald perspective. But at the same time, like, it's the beauty of art, right? Is you bring to it something, you take something away from it, and it's always personal. It's never, ever universal. You're going to get out of the show what you want. But I think as a producer of content, which is what we do here on Pending Rebrand on the Graying Jedi, people don't care if you don't take the time to explain why they should. Why do I give a crap about your main character? To be honest, at the end of this, I really don't give a crap about Osha or May. And I think that was a big failing of this show. I really want to know more about Kimir. I want to know more about Sol. I want to hear more about Plagueis, Vernestra Rowe. I want to know more about this Wookiee Jedi. Like, I'd never heard of a Wookiee Jedi before. I just think that there's so many more Jedi stories you could tell. In the High Republic, even. They really don't have to tie into any of this. They could just be... I hate Monster of the Week episodes of TV shows. I really, really do. But you could absolutely do like a Tales of the Jedi, where it's just, we're going to go explore this planet for old Jedi artifacts because this was once inhabited by a small band of Jedi that went missing and were never heard of again. And supposedly they lived here for a few generations. And oh, goodness, we found ruins. And oh, look at this. Like they had a whole something or other. And build a story out of that. You know, you have this space whale story that you told. You spent a lot of time developing in Ahsoka. There's a whole other galaxy we could be exploring right now. Another galaxy far, far away that has Jedi, that has Sith, that has Force witches, or maybe all sorts of new things we hadn't thought about. Maybe even droid Jedis. But with that, may the Force be with you.